Oi oi, it's your boy, making Marcus McGee look like Nanny McPhee. Jack Slack, it's the Jack Slack podcast, coming at you following UFC Abu Dhabi. Have some good fights. Derrida versus Whittaker, banger. Lots of other good stuff on that card. Came away feeling pretty good about the state of the sport in Abu Dhabi, but nowhere else. It was a pretty solid night of fights. I think there's sort of mixed emotions because a lot of people feel like Robert Whittaker was truly washed in the main event. But I felt like there were some good scraps on this one. Certainly the main card I came in for because it was in Abu Dhabi, so I got to watch it in normal time, which was fantastic as a UK fan. Kind of fantastic because on one hand, you're watching it live going, oh, I can get involved, I can chat to people, I can tweet about this, I can enjoy it live as it's happening and experience the excitement of that. And then a fight finishes early, and there's 25 minutes of patter, and I go, oh, yeah, I really like watching these in the morning with fast forward. And certainly I missed the first three fights. I went back and I had to watch Buday versus Betcha on 2x speed. That was a horrible fight. But yes, after an inauspicious start with a heavyweight and a light heavyweight decision, this one picked up speed and steam and turned out really quite fun. So main event was Reinier Derrida versus Robert Whittaker. And I think a lot of people were using this as a sort of a measuring stick on how washed Robert Whittaker is. But I also think that a lot of people... It's kind of like how boxing fans have headbutt blindness. They don't see it happen. Even if someone gets visibly stunned by a headbutt. MMA fans seem to have bodywork blindness. Because Reinier Derrida came out and he proved basically everything that everyone is always saying, or everyone, who wants to see improvement in MMA striking, is always saying about, one, the clinch, and two, bodywork, because he got his ass beat out in the open. Every time they came close, he landed some knees to the body, whether that was a big stepping knee intercepting Rob as he came in, or a series of small digging knees from a clinch. And wouldn't you know it, Robert Whittaker, who always has tremendous cardio, looked like crap from round two. It's never been more obvious, and I think a lot of people are going to go, well, Rob's washed. That's what happened there. Rather than, well, it's great for fighters like Reinier Derrida who aren't the fastest and don't have the best striking attributes. If you keep ignoring that and he just keeps wearing people down. But from the start of this one, you saw how fast Robert Whittaker was, and Reinier Derrida, his reactions to punches are not great. He does the Brock Lesnar turn away. You can be as tough as you want as a wrestler and all that stuff, but you still react really badly to punches. And Reinier Derrida has a bit of that. He sort of backs off and turns his head away from the punches, which makes it very hard to do meaningful counter-striking. But if it's stopping Rob Whittaker from knocking you out in the first round when he's very, very quick, that's great, because they engaged a few times and Rob Whittaker looked way faster than him. And I was saying this is not a great start for Reinier Derrida to be so far from the opposite fence, because Reinier Derrida does a lot of good getting in on singles and then running guys to the fence and finishing the takedown on the fence, which we're going to talk about lots with Betcha, with how terrible his wrestling game was in his fight. Just shooting out in the open and falling down onto his face. But in the run-up to this fight, I was talking about the stickiness of Reinier Derrida and how he's a slow, unexplosive striker, but he does a great job of sticking to people and pulling them into a clinch. Even if he has to take an overhook, a collar tie, he'll pull them in and he'll start working them with knees, the odd elbow, but mainly like these little pitty-patter shots to the body with his punches too. And looking for takedowns and stuff from there. But he ends up on an arm drag in the middle of the cage in a clinch, and Rob Whittaker feeds his other arm through to Reinier Derrida's hip. So they're locked up in this position where Reinier Derrida's got two hands on one of Rob's. And he's standing sort of side onto him. He just starts lifting up his nearest knee and putting it into Rob Whittaker's stomach. And he did it like 20, 30 times. And this is something I talk about a lot with clinch striking, just generally in MMA. But if you watch someone who was good at landing knees in the clinch, like Demetrius Johnson, or actually, Demetrius Johnson and Pantoja don't have a lot of similarities initially when you look at them. But one of the things they were really good at doing, both of them, is landing knees in transition between grappling and striking, or rather striking and grappling ranges, striking and clinch ranges, coming out of the clinch, passing guard or making transitions on the ground. They're always looking for these little knees to the body. And both of them are very good at getting the actual kneecap into the actual meat of the body. Whether that's the ribs or the liver or something good, the solar plexus. there's a lot of guys who throw knees as hard as they can, and what happens is basically the top of their quad hits the opponent with good force, but it doesn't do anything. Whereas if you actually just turn your knee at the right angle, turn your leg at the hip to the right angle, and just dig with the right part of the knee, not even particularly hard, you can really wear on people. If you watch some Thais training clinch work, a lot of the time they do these big swinging knees, and they make a big smack sound because they do it with the inside of the thigh when they're training, because that's just, you know, a great way to do it safely. And you also get a good sound and you get to go, oh, hey, which they love to. That's when you're hitting someone with your thigh, whether that's the inner thigh or top of the thigh, that's specifically the wrong way to knee someone, because they do it to not hurt people. And still in MMA, guys load up on knees. They get their hips way back. They throw a big knee and they hit with the thigh. And they wonder where all the power goes and why they're not sapping on the opponent. But go and watch some Demetrius Johnson. Some of the ones some of the fights where he did good clinch work off the fence and he used the double collar tie and he's just needling people with knees. Or Islam Makhachev's a great current example. He does this stuff where he's got his back to the fence and he has the overhook. He picks up the knee and it literally just the space of him picking it up and then pushing his hip forward a bit. He'll dig it into the opponent's body enough that they react, and as they step back a little bit, he steps through and throws them with that overhook. Did it to Oliveira, did it to Thiago Moises. They're a great lubricant for the grappling in the clinch. And on the mat, actually. You just don't see people using them on the mat. But yeah, Derrida got off dozens of these little knees, and he actually turned back into Rob and hit him with the back knee once, which looked like it hurt. And then as soon as that exchange ended, it was maybe like 2-3 minutes into round one, Robert Whittaker was not moving nearly as fast. Didn't look horribly gassed at that point, but at least he'd slowed down. And you can do that by getting people into the clinch and just making them use some energy. That's not even like you have to knee them constantly. But if you've got someone who's real fast, or at least significantly faster than you in the opening, stick to him as fast as possible. Because you don't want to get blindsided in the first minute and smoked. And the number of guys who come through in MMA, and even in boxing, who are so dangerous in round 1 and 2, and as soon as they aren't fresh fast, they just aren't scary anymore. So it's a good strategy for everyone. Just stick to someone and say, calm down, mate, in the first couple of minutes. Otherwise, it was Robert Whittaker doing his usual jab and jab cross. We were all waiting with bated breath for the jab cross high kick, which he throws 3 times a fight, but he didn't do it. Ever. I don't think he threw a single high kick at Reinier Derrida, which was very weird because, obviously Derrida's 4 inches taller than him, which makes a big difference. And Derrida stands up very straight a lot of the time. We were talking about this on the Boycast, but if you are significantly taller than the opponent, often you have to squat down a bit to get them level with your shoulder to maximize your reach advantage. But Derrida stands pretty tall in his stance. But that's good if you want to grab collar ties, knee people, tower over them. Standing tall is what you want to do. It does make you very susceptible to overhands, which is foreshadowing. But then Derrida was looking for these stepping knees. And that was basically the extent of Derrida striking this fight. He threw the odd jab, which he occasionally caught Rob on the end of. And I was talking about this on the Boycast. I was saying, like, he has a very bad read on whether people are moving back or forward. He has very bad anticipation, which means that he ends up sort of stepping in with kicks and stuff, and the opponent's on top of him, which is a topic that I moan about every week, but I'm going to moan about it especially because of how Muhammad Yaya fought and how that contrasted with Davy Grant. But we'll get into that later. A lot of the time, Derrida looks like he has no power because he hits people halfway through his punch. He steps in too far, or they step in as he's stepping in. It looks awful. But if you watch him when he's got someone who's tired and he's there on the end of his reach, he can snap him with that jab quite well. The stepping knees were the big one because that single weapon, and you saw it against Bo Nickel, but that single weapon turned him from being sort of just a guy who's getting by on the feet to someone who's got something genuinely dangerous. Because it's not always the fastest. It's hard to throw a stepping knee fast, but it is linked to your hips very well. It's like elbows, I always say, are. If you're crap at punching, you can't get any power in your punches. You throw a good elbow, you take out one whole you take out quite a bit of the kinetic chain. You just have to turn your shoulders, and you'll get a decent bit of stank on your elbow. If you're stepping in over a good distance and you're driving your knee through on the front of your hip, you can get some serious power on it. And you saw that any time that Rob stepped in at the same time, he took a horrible connection. Even if it hit him like in the pec or in the arm, it was like a car crash every time they both came together, and Derrida was throwing that knee. And that's always very dangerous if you're the shorter guy coming in anyway, because if you're throwing big overhands, you're normally leaning forward a bit. You get that knee in the jaw. Could be good night. So Rob looked tired from about round 2 because of these knees. And the punches in the clinch, you can't underrate those. He does. When you watch Derrida in the clinch, he takes the overhook and leans on the guy against the fence. You normally get the underhooks and you turn the guy onto the fence and you lean on him with the underhook, as Barry Alt was doing against Shara Bullet. But Derrida takes the overhook and leans in on the guy, and then he uses his other hand to push their wrist down and pass that hand to his overhook, so he's controlling both of their arms with one hand, and then he can look to land like knees and elbows. But the course of them fighting that, he'll start punching them just like under the pec on that side. So he's always throwing these little chipping punches. And I know he's a listener to the podcast, so I'm going to say look up Bat Nelson and his half scissor left hook, because I would be fascinated to see someone try that in MMA. Battling Nelson was a 1920, oh no, before that even, 1910s lightweight in boxing. And he said that once he discovered the half scissor left hook, he changed from a good fighter to a great fighter. And it is literally is your thumb and forefinger, because they had small gloves. You could do this through your gloves. And he would do it. He'd just shove that into the liver every time they came close enough. And he said that you could knock a guy down or out with a liver shot from like 6 inches with this half scissor left hook. And in MMA gloves, you've got enough of your digits free that you could play around with things like that and the single knuckle fist and all those things. And if you're going to be standing on top of someone just hitting them with 50 pity patter punches to the chest anyway, you might as well try and make them hurt a little bit more with a weird hand configuration. If you're feeling crazy, you could try the Boshiken, which is like the middle joint of the thumb. But I digress. Lots of clinching, lots of pity patter work. Eventually got him down in the second round, which was impressive because Rob is a good wrestler. He's a very good wrestler. And he qualified for the Commonwealth Games, I think, on the Australian wrestling team. Now, the Australian wrestling team, obviously not world famous, but he was the best wrestler in the country at his weight. And the UFC said, no, actually, as you're already missing out on fights in the UFC because you get injured so much, we're not going to let you go and represent your country in the wrestling. But he's good. He's accomplished. And in MMA wrestling, he's also very good. But I thought something interesting about when Derrida got him down. I think most people expected Derrida to really buzzsaw through him on the ground if he got him there because of what Dricus du Plessis was able to do. I think Rob made some good adaptations from the du Plessis fight because du Plessis got top half guard and he kept letting Whittaker up on the underhook. And as soon as you get the underhook from the bottom of half guard, you can start building up. But you've got to get on an elbow or a hand, ideally. And if the guy takes the overhook and just chops you down on that elbow, puts you on the low shoulder, they call it, you can get stuck there and elbowed in the head and then darsed, or just threatened with the darce and elbowed in the head some more, which is what du Plessis. He kept threatening the darce, and then Whittaker would straighten his body out to get away from the darce, and he'd just elbow him in the head as he was completely, naked out in the open with his chin exposed. If you watch Ngannou's last MMA fight against that giant lad, fake Verdum, what's his name? Oh, Renan Ferreira. If you watch that, the one in PFL that everyone watched for free, so they didn't make a penny on it, he takes Ferreira down. Ferreira comes up on an underhook, and Francis just gets the whizzer and folds him down on the near shoulder and then beats him to death, basically. So it's a really powerful move, the underhook get-up. If you watch someone like Randy Couture, who basically invented it in MMA, you can get up from underneath big dudes. I think Randy Couture got up from underneath Brock Lesnar with it. But there's always that vulnerability before you get up to your elbow, or even if they overpower you down from your elbow. So Whittaker got beat up there against du Plessis. And in this fight, rather than trying to wrestle up on the underhook, he was using his legs to get a butterfly hook in from half guard and just sort of kept it, which worked. I mean, it kept him out of submission danger because it's very hard to darce someone from butterfly half guard. And it kept him from getting struck that much because you can't really posture up in the same way as you can if you're just sitting on the guy's bottom leg and he can't go anywhere. The thing about the butterfly stuff, though, is that, and you saw this in Mabaya versus Achoa on the same card, the butterfly hooks are really good for off-balancing the guy and creating opportunities to come up, but they take some effort to use. You've got to move the guy's weight. And especially if he's pushing your heels into your butt, you don't have a lot of strength to move him with, like Almabayev was driving in on Achoa. So what Whittaker ended up doing was, because it's a good position to stop the guy passing and advancing, but if you don't have a lot of energy, it's going to be hard to start creating, sitting up to sweep, or sitting up to get to a hand to stand up. So he ended up just sort of on the bottom with the butterfly hook, stopping Derrida from advancing, but not really achieving anything. Ironically, it reminded me of the second best Dutch middleweight, Gegard Mousasi. He used to just get one butterfly hook in from everywhere and be like, right, I'll wait and see, and then whoop, oh, I'm out. But for this fight, there was no whoop, I'm out for Rob Whittaker. He just ended up sort of stuck there for most of the fight. When he ended up on the bottom, that was. But then, of course, every round starts again on the feet. There was a moment in round 3 that got really hairy for Derrida because he stepped in with a knee and got clubbed in the head with an overhand, which is a real danger. If you remember, that happened to Volkov against Derek Lewis. Personally, I would never want to trade my overhand for someone's knee. But if it lands, it's really bad for them. That's one that Golden Age Muay Thai enthusiasts get mad about. They're always on about how guys get knocked out attempting big stepping knees. Where in the old days, the knee was like a shorter counter weapon. Even the stepping knee was like an intercepting weapon. But then those same guys will suck off Diesel Noy, and he loved just lunging after guys with knees. So Derrida was in a lot of trouble there, but he managed to pull through. He did hold the gloves a little bit, which Rob got very angry about. But basically, the last round, Rob didn't do anything. He was completely spent, and Derrida was able to push him to the fence and hammer him with little pussycat punches, as Mario Sperry would call them, for the duration. And basically, because it was about one, it was probably about 2-2. I think most people had it like 2-2, maybe 3-1, going into the fifth. And that round was decidedly Derrida, and he got the decision. It was kind of impressive in a way because you saw, if you were watching him in the first round, you went, oh, wow, he's getting to the body early. And, you know, he's at such a speed disadvantage and his technical striking looks so bad out in the open. But then you saw the effect of that bodywork coming through and you're going, yeah, wow. And he's taking him down effectively because he's tiring him out. So you could see the plan working, but even then it was still scraped the victory. And a lot of people obviously think that Rob's completely washed now. So hard to hype a Reinier Derrida title shot off that, but I'd be excited for it, whether it's against Chimaev or Duplessis. Duplessis would be one of the goofiest fights ever, because they're both so strange. And Chimaev would be the master wrestler, MMA wrestler, fence wrestler, versus the weird grappler. Though tons of instances on this card of people getting on guys' backs and falling the fuck off, which I'm always talking about. If you are wrestling up on the fence and you have your hands down on the mat and they jump on your back, you're getting choked because your hands are on the mat. If you roll to your back in the middle of the cage, almost no one is getting choked anymore. Betcha is a 13-time world champion in BJJ, a several-time ADCC champion in no-gi, and he was trying to get on Martin Buday's back and just falling off. There was one where he slid over the top and his head bonked into the floor with 250 pounds of Betcha behind it. I was like, that is not the BJJ legend in MMA. That is how Batman dispatches a goon who's jumped on his back and tried to choke him. Complete with biff across the screen. But that one was trash. I don't know. I don't even know why I'm talking about that one. It was utter garbage. Buday came in quite hyped because everyone knows his accomplishments, but anyone who'd seen his MMA fights was like, it's not looking that great. He took this fight on very short notice, having escaped a one championship contract. They're losing all their MMA fighters currently. I'm guessing he desperately needed money, because there's no reason that you would do this at such short notice if you're in such terrible shape. Any good fighter who's taken a fight at short notice they take the call and they go, let me just see where I'm at. And they run themselves through a horrendous training session and they see. That's why I respect people like Gina Carano and Rocky Marciano back in the day. Rocky Marciano, they asked him to come back to fight Johansson when Johansson won the belt from Patterson, because they were like, oh, bring the belt back to America, Rocky. And he said, right, let me do some research. And he went into camp. He put himself through like a half camp to check. And he said, no, I'm not close to that. I'm not going to come back. And you got to respect that, because he could have sold out an arena. He could have made, like $1 million off that. Maybe more. Anyway, other stuff on this card. Co-main event was Petan versus Marcus McGee. I think this one sort of lived up to my expectations, because a lot of people were like, yeah, why is Jan fighting the number 12 ranked guy in the world? And I was like, yeah, but also it's a good fight. Marcus McGee, largely untested next to like the standard of competition that Jan has fought, but very, very good, clearly, from his like existing UFC record and the fights that we've seen him in. Trains with several of the best other bantamweights in the world at MMA Lab. They got Kyler Phillips, Mario Batista, someone else, and Marcus McGee. They've got a good crew down there if you're bantamweight. But this was another classic. Everyone predicts Jan by murder. He loses 1 round, wins 2, spends most of round 3 kneeing the butt from the back body lock, and you sort of revise your prediction down to, that's what I meant by Jan by murder. I think people have come to realise he's not the best finisher in the world. He's brilliant. Like, he's got an amazing gift for violence. He does the coolest shit, and he hurts people in every fight, but he's just not very good at finishing. First round you could give to McGee. I saw Jan doing enough that you could give it to Jan, but I thought that was a good round for McGee because I said from the start, everyone knows Jan takes the first round off. He's chronically low output in the first round, and then he just turns it on in round 2. He's kind of Mayweather-like in that he's the second half of the fight. That's where he fights. And if you can do it, it's a great way to run away with things because the guy is always going to be fresher in the first half than in the second half. And if you are saving it for the second half, you know the rounds that he wins are going to look a lot less convincing than the rounds that you win against a tired version of him. But I like what McGee was doing. You know, he's a switch hitter, but he came out southpaw and stayed mainly southpaw for this fight. Petr Yan uses a lot of high guard, so both his hands on his head. He does like what Michael Watson used to do, fingertips on forehead. And he also does a lot of long guard, which is where you extend your lead hand either towards the opponent's face, like their palm, or I mean, he used to do fingers straight at people's faces, but then he got warned a couple of times and now he doesn't. Or you can put it over their shoulder, which is what he was looking for a lot, to try and grab a hold of them as they come in. But he uses a lot of guarding. He's there to be hit, but he uses his elbows and his shoulders and his frames to stop people from landing cleanly and tucking his head down, you know, chin down, top of the forehead, exposed to punches. McGee was doing a decent job of finding good connections in that. So he was throwing like a slapping right hook around the side and you could hear his corner. I thought his corner was giving good advice. They said he'll always circle that way when you throw the right hook. So he'd circle him into the left straight off that. He was using the up jab followed by the left straight. He was doing a good amount of hand traffic, you know, hand fighting, checking with his hands, but also throwing punches, moving his head, showing lots of fakes and feints. His feints worked really well in the first round to set up his entries because he was hitting Jan pretty clean with some of those shots. And then Jan woke up in the second round and went to work. I think part of what was getting McGee in trouble was that he was being very creative with his entries. And I put out a tweet saying, "Oh, entries looking great." And then my next tweet was in the second round, like, "Oh, exits aren't looking great," because he'd get in with throw 3 things to land 1 or throw 4 things to land 1. And then Jan would either pull him into the clinch, hit him with a couple of uppercuts, and then hit him on the way out, or he'd just step back and throw a big right hook, retreating. He's very good at hitting people on the breaks, Jan. And he's also very good at pulling you into clinches, threatening you from there. If you watch his fight with O'Malley, he does a lot of backstepping swings, which work really well out of the clinch. If he convinces you you're in a clinch now, he does what I like to call like a longer clinch or a long clinch. You know, clinches where it's not chest to chest. There's normally like a collar tie or a bicep tie or something like that. He'll convince you that you're going into clinch work, and then he'll step back and swing on the way out. And he caught McGee with a couple of those. Either Fino or Miguel on Twitter put up a great little highlight of him using the long guard as McGee steps in. He extends his lead hand over McGee's shoulder, and he dips his head down to the side. So he's doing a slip and a long guard. And then he just pulls McGee in after McGee stepped in. Then he hammers him with a couple of uppercuts, looks for an elbow, looks for a knee. Third round, he got back body lock along the fence and he just kneed the butt, which is, it's not the most devastating offense, but it is like Rob Whittaker did it to Uriah Hall. I've seen it happen a dozen times in fights when guys, particularly when guys spin. I don't think McGee spun, but when guys spin and the other guy just crashes into their back and goes, "Right, you're not having that back now. You've got to fight out of that position." And there are people like Corey Sandhagen's very good at peeling the hands and getting away from that position. But most of the time, people have to dig themselves out of that. So if you're getting a free minute and a half, 2 minutes of winning, don't give it back to them by breaking and trying to swing at them. And then Jan managed to hit a beautiful Osotogari, his cross-step trip, cross-buttock, they used to call it back in the London prize fighting days. But a beautiful throw, and he ended up on the arm attacking a Kimura from there. It was a gorgeous little combination. And you're like, did he see that in the moment? Because he's very good at seeing things in the moment. Or does that happen all the time in training? Because I presume he lands that sweep so many times in training, he must know what's probably coming up from there. The way he set that up was really nice, though, because he'd been fighting orthodox for the most part, and McGee had been fighting southpaw. And I think McGee was very aware of the threat of the trips. And what he did was he put his guard up as McGee was coming in. He took a step back into southpaw, and then he put his leg behind McGee and swept him over. That's the fun of two switch hitters fighting. Like, there are some really clever ways you can hide the switch. Because when you're fighting someone who's also a switch hitter, you kind of have to hide the switches and trick him into it, because he knows you're trying to switch to get a particular thing normally. So a good win for Jan, because he beat a top 10, what is he, top 10? Top 15 guy. And a good performance for McGee, because he showed he's absolutely deserving of being in the top 15. Shah Magomedov versus Marc-Andre Barriel. I mean, it's classic Shah Magomedov. It's in Abu Dhabi because he can't legally fight stateside, and it's against someone who's not very good at taking people down, because we want to see Shah Magomedov do what he do. I love that he's 16-1, but we all sort of recognise that his record is fraudulent. Not in that he's like didn't beat the guys that he beat, but when you look at the guys he beat, you're like, yeah, well, you know, they're picking them carefully for you. But I love it. I think it's fine to have a guy like that just be sort of an attraction. You should contrast his kicking with Muhammad Yaya, because Sharabulik will kick from positions where you're like, oh, it's a bit risky to kick from there, but he does a very good job of convincing the guy to pick his leg up, and then as it comes down, he kicks it, or he'll throw something fake, like he'll fake a double jump knee just to come down and land with a low kick on the outside of the leg, normally with the foot, so they're not even that damaging, but he's very good at landing that one particular strike. We were talking about the double collar tie the other day. Go watch the Yacht in Film Room, but we were talking about how it doesn't really happen that much in Muay Thai, and it doesn't really happen in MMA that much anymore. But I've said Demetrius Johnson was very good at it, Verdum was very good at it, but I forgot to mention Sharabulik is very good at finding the double collar tie, and he's very good at finding it with his back to the fence like Demetrius Johnson used to. If you can get the double collar tie and wedge your forearms really in front of the opponent and not let them compress your elbows into your body, you're in a pretty strong position there along the fence. It's as your elbows start to come into your body and you get crumpled up and you're not really framing on them, you're just sort of holding them. That's when it gets tricky. But he was able to frame on Barriel's collarbones with his elbows, and even landed some good elbows. Back in the day when Junior Dos Santos fought Cain Velasquez for the third time, Cain Velasquez was going to bury his head and he had the underhook and he'd just throw these short punches and look for trips and knees, and that was what Barriel was doing here, the odd elbow. But JDS, his plan for the third one was to bench press Cain Velasquez's head away, and then because Cain Velasquez was pushing in the whole time, he'd let it drop back in on top of an elbow. And he stunned him really badly in, I think, round 1. But then the effort of bench pressing a guy off you over and over again quickly made that like not a viable way to fight. But I like what Shah Magomedov did here. He did the something Bas Rutten did to Kevin Randleman back in the day, which I don't think is legal anymore. You instead of doing like the hand choke where you got both hands on the front of the opponent's neck, the Homer Simpson, just pushing them back that way, you put your thumbs down behind their clavicles, which is really unpleasant, and it makes them move their head back. And then you give them a push to help them, and then you try and elbow them. So he landed a good few from there. He got clipped with an overhand, standing in the fence. I mean, that's the thing about Sharabulik. From moment 1 of round 1, his back foot is on the fence. So if someone is good at wrestling, they're going to be able to just run over him. Or if someone's good at striking along the fence, they're going to be able to beat him up. But Barriel was just chasing headshots the whole fight. No kicking the legs to slow him down. No punching the body to slow him down. Just swinging for the head. Falling into clinches. Did eventually beat him up a bit from the clinch, which I enjoyed. After he'd stunned him with a right hand that sort of crumpled his nose. But Shara pulled it back in the third. Fun fight. You know what you're getting with Sharabulik. You're getting all sorts of flashy shit in service of landing kicks with the end of the foot to the lead thigh. Asu Mabaya versus Jose Achoa, or Jose Achoa, what are we? Where is he from? Hold on. Peru. So, Jose? Question mark? This was, it was a good showing for Mabaya, but man, he's so small. This is the smallest weight class the UFC offer, and he's clearly too small to be in it. I mean, I say too small. He controlled this fight. He won pretty convincingly. But on the feet, he's got such a huge height and reach disadvantage against almost everyone. If you watched him against Cup, a fight where Cup cheated his ass off, like a lot of Cup fights, to be honest. But he only did it because he forgot to pull out before the fight. But if you watch that fight, it's like a man fighting a child, the size disparity. And with Mabaya and Joshua Van, I'm like, bring in a strawweight class, because there are more good strawweight men than strawweight women in the UFC now. That weight class, the women's strawweight, just fell off a cliff. I feel so lucky to have been in that era where we had Jędrzejczyk, Namajunas, and Zhang Weili all coming up at the same time. Well, no, not coming up at the same time, sort of overlapping. And it was like, damn, future's bright for this weight class. And it's just been, yeah, dirge ever since. Rose is still beating people and looking terrible. But yeah, what did I really like in this fight? Oh, Almabayev, when he got to the back, body lock, he would do this beautiful off balance and then jump over Achoa's back and try and put his hooks in. He did it twice in the first round. And he did end up falling off over the top, which is the risk there. But if you are significantly smaller than the guy, you might as well jump. Yeah, do it. If you end up on the bottom, that's pretty bad. But there's got to be some kind of advantage you can glean from being small. I always talk about Marcelo Garcia in grappling used to jump and put his feet in the back of the opponent's knees to pull them over, which is horrible. Pantoja does that sometimes now, when he sits down into crab ride. I think this was another example of the guy on bottom getting butterfly hooks and looking effective, as in like stopping the other guy from advancing and doing much, but not being able to use the butterfly hooks to create space and get up because they were pressed into his butt the whole time. Threatened a couple of triangles though, very shoot box sort of style. Bogdan Guskov versus Nikita Krillov. He started kicking and then he started boxing, and I was tweeting, oh, Krillov, always forgetting the one thing that makes you interesting in that weight class is that you've got this cool Kyokushin background and kicks. And then the moment he went back to kicking, he got smoked. So I promptly deleted that. Man. Honestly, kind of glad to have Guskov succeeding because I've been all in on Nikita Krillov. I've been like, maybe now, after leaving the UFC and coming back, in a contract dispute, maybe now he'll realize his potential, and he just doesn't. He's not that good. Bogdan Guskov, not a particularly good boxer, but the way that he fights with his hands down and he leads with his right hands and stuff, it's unusual, and he's got good timing and a good read on opponents. He gets them walking onto things. So Krillov, who's a pretty decent kicker, managed to walk himself onto a counter right hand. Which brings us to Muhammad Yaya versus Stephen Nuin. I think people went mad about Stephen Nuin winning this one. They were like, oh, he looks like a killer, but he was getting dropped by a guy he'd dropped 5 times who had some of the worst striking I've ever seen. But Muhammad Yaya comes out with the Jack Slack podcast special, which Lucas Bresky did the other week, and I forgot to mention. I see it every bloody week. Guy comes out, thinks, well, I'm going to feel him out by throwing a good hard low kick, and steps up and gets punched in the face. Because you still have to set up your low kicks. You still have to fake a bit so that they don't just step in on you. And also, they don't know what they're doing at that moment in the fight. If they just happen to step in when you're doing a big step-up low kick, you're going to get blasted in the face. I think he was even going for a body kick, which is even dumber. But yeah, Yaya got blasted on one leg. Then ended up on the cage for the whole first round. Kept trying to kick off the cage. So he'd do run-up kicks off the cage, get blasted again. Jumping knee off the cage, which missed, and then got blasted again. Then exchanged punches and got hit with a counter left hook and dropped again. Then he managed to drop Nuin off the cage, which is embarrassing. And then he got to the end of the second round and his eye had exploded, so they had to stop the fight. But if your back is to the fence, don't throw run-up kicks like you expect them to back up. Like, that's just don't do that. That's a really bad idea. And then Yaya's punching form was hilarious. He had his hands down by his waist, and it was like he was either operating a pulley at about waist level with his arms going backwards and forwards, or doing one of those giant Q-tips on American gladiators, or British gladiators. Some of the worst punching form I've ever seen on this dude. And he's fought 3 times in the UFC, all of them in Abu Dhabi because he's from Abu Dhabi, and every time he's lost. Will he get a 4th at lightweight, which is actually a fairly decent division? Billy Alicana, whatever that fight was, I skipped it because I saw his fight against Guskov and I was like, this guy's no good. And then people tell me that it was one of the worst fights they've ever seen, so I'm glad I skipped it. Tabitha Ricci stopped Amanda Ribas in a fight where she didn't look great, but that shows you, we see it from time to time. If you get an elbow point into the eye, or you get the orbital decently, people just lose their will to fight almost instantly. That's the real man maker. It tells you who really wants it and who is just going to go like, oh my God, I might go blind. I'm going to lay down here. Muslim Salikov knocked out Carlos Leal. Do you know what's hilarious about Muslim Salikov? He was such a timid striker his entire career. his whole game was like, I did a Filthy Casuals guide on it back in the day, shoulder fake and pull back. He would fake a jab that he would never throw and see what the opponent did, and then he'd try and low kick him on the counter or spin. And so he had these fights that were very slow, and maybe he'd land one good cool spinning kick in the fight or one good low kick in the round. And I'd go, he's a very good technical fighter, and everyone would go, he's a very boring fighter, Jack. But as an old man, it seems like people are less afraid of him, and they just walk onto his counters and back kicks outright. Because Carlos Eel tried to walk him down, threw a big left hand, didn't roll down behind his left shoulder, didn't duck, didn't get his head offline, just ate a right hand on the return, off the fence from Salakov, and Salakov smoked him. If you haven't read the Jersey Joe Walcott article on the Patreon, go and do it, because every fighter in the world should learn how to reverse shoulder roll, just for when you are Southpaw versus Orthodox or Orthodox versus Southpaw, so you can throw your punch and then duck down behind your shoulder so you don't get knocked out immediately. Davy Grant looked great. Davy Grant's such a weird character. Not a weird character in like who he is as a person. I don't really know anything about it, except that he's very smiley and has a hilarious accent. But he's got such a weird career because he's fighting very good fighters generally. The last time he convincingly lost was maybe Marlon Vera back in 2021, and then before that, 2018. He fights kind of once a year. But he always looks better than the last time he fought. And he's got a good jab and a good straight and good low kicks that he sets up and good reactions. Like if you watch this fight with Blackshere, he goes for a step up inside low kick, which is where everyone gets knocked out in the first round. Halfway through, he realizes that Blackshere's closer than he thought he was. So he brings up his double forearms guard and gets back in position. Like he puts himself back in position. He reacts to Blackshere not moving back. And you can watch that throughout the fight. He'll go to do something and he'll change his mind and stop or retreat. And it's like, yeah, you should commit to blows if you step in to strike and you're hesitating. That's never great. But if you read that the guy's not moving how you were hoping he would, don't plow through and get blasted in the head. So first round, Blackshere gets him down. Grant hits a beautiful escape by controlling the hand, getting on the side, freeing the hook, and letting Blackshere fall off his back. And in the course, Blackshere attacks the armbar, but if you attack the armbar from like a bad beginning, you're probably not getting it. You could see that Davy Grant's arm, his elbow was pointing the wrong way for Blackshere to extend it across his hips. And then it seems like Blackshere gassed himself out doing that, because round 2 was all striking. Davy Grant beat him up, using that wide right to the body with the palm down that I love so much. And in the course of doing that, the wonderful thing about going to the body is that when Blackshere did level change for a takedown, Grant's hands were already underneath his chest, basically. So he had underhooks that he could dig and then pull him up. Lovely performance from Davy Grant. I'm thinking I might do something like an article, maybe an open article for everyone, not just the Patreon boys, but an article on him in the week because, I just love him. He's had a load of great fights over the last few years, and I think he might be one of the most talented fighters out of Britain, but it won't be remembered because he won't get anywhere near a title just because of how his career's gone. He's had loads of injuries. He's been fighting like once a year. He's had a couple of decisions that are just like obviously wrong. The Daniel Marcos one. And I thought he beat Yanez, but Yanez got the split decision. So even if he won every fight from now on against better and better opponents, I don't think there's any time for him to get like a title shot before he's too old to be banging his body up every day doing this training. But it's great to watch someone just get better and better. And he's kind of weird, but also all the stuff that he does well, he does weird stuff well, but all the stuff that he does, that you go, yeah, that's good, is things like jabs, low kicks, feints and setups, and good grappling, good technical grappling on the ground. And you're looking at it going, yeah, people could learn a lot from watching him. And then Bryce Mitchell versus Said Magomedov. This was where I came in. This was where I started watching the fights live. And I thought Bryce Mitchell looked all right here. Said Magomedov does fade a bit down the stretch, but Mitchell started on the upper body takedowns in the first round. Magomedov was wrestling well to counter it. Mitchell starts moving in on the fence against him, changes levels slightly, gets kneed in the head, and ends up fighting from the bottom for the rest of the round. There were several points in the fight where he was on the bottom and he's using rubber guard because he's a big Eddie Bravo fan. And honestly, it was working quite well to stop Magomedov from hitting him or advancing, which is the whole point, basically. I mean, you ideally want to attack from there, but he was using the meat hook, which is a variation of rubber guard, with his head against the fence in the second round. And it was threatening enough that Said Magomedov pulled his head out and backed up, and then Bryce Mitchell just got up. He used some nice underhook stuff from the bottom of half guard in the first round to come up on the body lock, turning a bad position into a good one. And then in the second round, he came out and he shot. And I went, oh, I thought you were going to do upper body takedowns along the fence. He ducked in and went for the waist. And then I think in the third round, he went for it again. And I thought he was sticking to the upper body takedowns because Said Nurmagomedov's thing is that he's very good at guillotining people. He's got an amazing power guillotine, which is where you get your elbow so deep that the front of their windpipe is in the V of your arm, as opposed to you pulling your forearm up into their windpipe. And Mitchell got caught pretty deep in one of those, and he sort of bonked his back to the mat and forced his way out. And Nurmagomedov took top position. Oh, that might have been the second round, actually. But yeah, that was quite cool. There were a few arm triangle attempts from the top from Mitchell, who must be a pretty smothering top player, because Nurmagomedov, I've seen him grapple well with people like Jonathan Martinez, and he couldn't do much under Mitchell. There was a really nice reversal from Nurmagomedov, though, in the first round when he was almost being arm triangled from side control. And normally guys, when they bridge over the top off the fence, they put their feet on the fence and they bridge away from the fence. His feet were facing away from the fence, so he brought his legs up overhead and used the fence to pull himself over the top. Very cool. But a decent fight, and I mean, it's promising that Bryce Mitchell can take a shot at 135, because we figured he'd probably be strong there. But there's this sort of duality with coming down 10 pounds. You were probably getting hit harder up in weight, but if you're doing a more severe weight cut, you're probably going to react to the punches worse. So intrigued to see where he goes. Favourite things? Probably Jan versus McGee. Davey Grant's always fun. Almabayev was good technical MMA. It wasn't, he's not the most threatening because he doesn't have much power on the feet. And he did, in fact, point to the ground and then shoot a takedown in the last 10 seconds. And then Guskov, I'm not sold on him in being good as a fighter, generally, but he's good enough at light heavyweight, and he's exciting, which we desperately need. So I'll be back later in the week to talk about some other stuff. If there was, I don't think there was any boxing this weekend, was there? There was a bit of kickboxing, but otherwise I'll be talking about Rising, Super Rising 4, Region Ursul's back in 1, and then we got Fight Night Amir Albazi versus Tatsuro Tairo, which is a solid fight, to be honest. How's the card looking? Pretty mid, but we'll enjoy it. Oh, Kevin Valley-Lost is fighting. He's always fun. Oh, return of Reinier Nakamura. Anyway, I'm your boy Jack Slack. Sign up to the Patreon, read all the articles, get all the extra stuff. Be a boy. Martin Buday's 7-1 UFC record. Kill this division now. Bless.